With the release of the new season of My Hero Academia coming out recently, I've decided to go ahead and take a look at this My Hero horror AU titled My Hero Academia Ruins, which of course is a play on the original Marvel's Ruins comic created back in 1995. And while I am one of those people who had a lot of criticisms for Marvel's Ruins, I wanted to go ahead and give this AU a chance to see if the creator actually took a different spin with it. Especially because I do really enjoy My Hero Academia. Now, I want to go ahead and start off by showcasing our protagonist in the story, which of course is Deku. All the characters have been aged up, which is why he is 26, and he looks so sad because in this world, the government and many of the heroes are no longer heroic, but rather using their power and influence to dominate others, acquire wealth, and generally make the lives of the weaker people and heroes miserable. This AU gets even darker when we add in the fact that many heroes also have defective quirks, which cause them great harm or send them to the afterlife. And Deku seems to be acting as some type of investigator / reporter, going around and interviewing many of these people with defective quirks, essentially being the Phil from Marvel Ruins here. And while he's trying to find answers that may help bring light to this dark reality, he's also trying to find answers for an illness that is literally eating him alive. Now that we have some of the backstory, let's go ahead and follow Deku as he recounts some of the cases that he's worked on over the years. The first character that we see is Uraraka, and she went out very early. Basically, her quirk came online when she was just a toddler and she happened to be outside. And since she didn't know how to control her ability, she simply kept floating until she reached outer space. And she seems to be like the parallel to Silver Surfer or Galactus in the Marvel Ruins comic. Next we see Bakugo, and we learn that in a fit of rage, he ended up blowing up his family's home and taking out his own parents in the process, while also losing both of his arms. And while he and Deku are still childhood friends, Bakugo is so crazy now that relationship is basically over, and all he does is just yell and scream at folks, which funny enough is still kind of close to his personality in the show. After that, we have the character called Mina, and I really liked her in the show. It was sad to see that her powers basically started eating her up from the inside out, because if you don't remember, her power is basically like acid. We also see that the general public has started calling her the Alien Queen, which again kind of showcases how needlessly cruel this reality and more importantly, the humans are here. The next character we have is Red Riot, and his hardening quirk acts as a disease that dries out not only his skin, but his flesh as well. And this basically means that he is slowly losing pieces of himself day after day. And since he didn't want to go out like that, he ended up checking out early to avoid all that pain, saying, "I'm fed up with this illness, with this life, with this body. I'm fed up with this world which is withering away." Just like me. Next we have the petting hero, and this guy basically became a hermit living out in the mountains because he wanted to escape people who wanted to take him out. Some people claim it's because he looks like a monster, and he also uses animals to spy and abuse on people traveling through the forest. And this is kind of our first hint that this AU is not simply going to involve body horror, but likely step into the realms of berserk horror, if you catch my drift. After that, we see Tokoyami, and he was unable to control Dark Shadow, which caused him to be consumed by the darkness. And while some heroes actually tried to help him, they all ended up suffering the same fate, which doesn't surprise me when I think about just how strong this character's quirk really was in the show, especially if they tried to fight him at nighttime. And while I think that this interpretation here may be off when he says, "I don't know who I am anymore," the it or the I think he's referring to the id or the ego maybe, saying that the id, which would be like Dark Shadow, is taking over his mind and his body. And for the people who may not know what I'm talking about here, basically Sigmund Freud had a theory that the mind was broken into three parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is basically like our lizard brain, the part of our brain that just reacts on instinct pretty much, which I think represents Dark Shadow very well. And this is likely what Yami was talking about when he said he felt like the id was taking him over. Mineta is next, and while I never really liked this character in the show or characters in anime that are kind of like this trope, I think he deserved a little bit better than this. His ability basically turned into giant tumors that disfigured him and caused him a ton of pain. And apparently he was taken out by an angry mob when he was seen flirting with a woman. So it sounds like the people did this simply because he was an easy target and they knew that they would actually get away with it in this corrupt world. After that, we have Jiro, and she's the first character with some interesting lore. It seems like she's acting as a rebel, pushing back against the government, basically using her quirk to spy on secret conversations between corrupt heroes and politicians. And then she would get on stage and release that information to the public in her music. But of course, she was quickly silenced because the government figured out that she knew far too much. And honestly, I wish that the story would have focused more on this aspect of it, because I love this idea, and being able to see this story through the eyes of rebels would have been really cool. And after that, we see Dinky, and I don't know if this guy was actually a rebel, but after the death of Jiro, he basically became radicalized, going into the middle of like a city and using his ability to not only knock the power out, but also harm as many people as he could. The only reason I think he didn't cause more harm is because all the excess electricity in his body actually took him out, burning him basically to a crisp. After that, we get Ray, and she is also burned to a crisp, showcasing that Endeavor is definitely still a piece of crap in this AU, and is likely still trying to get the perfect baby. We also notice that Ray is completely crazy and carrying around a doll with half its face melted, calling it Shoto. And I don't know if this means that Shoto is actually gone in this AU, or maybe Endeavor just like keeps him away from his mother. But I wouldn't put it past him because Endeavor was already kind of cruel even in the original My Hero Academia, so him doing some crazy stuff in this AU wouldn't surprise anybody. After that, we see Zero, and even in this dark reality, he actually tried to be a real good hero and had his life stolen for the effort. They even ended up wrapping him in his own tape and throwing him in this dumpster. And something else interesting is that on the wall next to where they found him, there was some spray painting that read, "Humans are evil by nature. Are heroes human? Are we still human?" And this sentiment kind of reminds me a lot of what we see in the Boys universe, specifically Generation V, kind of showcasing how much potential this AU could have. Next we have Ojiro, and this guy thinks that he has a quirk, but it's actually just a birth defect, similar to like a parasitic twin. And he's basically convinced himself that he's not just a normal human, but amongst the gods, or aka people with abilities / quirks, which again gives us another small look into how people view heroes in this world. After that, we get to see the class president, and due to the fact that his family was already connected to the government, he became one of the most respected heroes. And while you would probably think that he would be one of the few characters that wouldn't get corrupted by this world, that is not the case. He has no problem engaging in harmful acts in order to get information out of criminals or people who go against the government, and has even less concern about taking their lives. And since he's holding a pistol here, I wouldn't be surprised if he was the person that took out Jiro, since it looks like there's a bullet right here. I also find this quote interesting. He says, "I'm a savior, a hero, the purifier of this world. I will be the symbol of peace." Showing that he has fully drank the Kool-Aid and is just like a dog for the government at this point. After that, we see Sato, and this guy believes that his quirk is punishment from God, because when he was a kid, he ended up having some sweets, and then he hurt some of the other kids in his class. And I have to say that it is kind of funny that everybody else is living in this hellish landscape, becoming super evil, or their quirks are going against them, while this dude is just working a regular job and eating clean. While it does seem a bit inconsistent, at least it did give me a good laugh. And speaking of inconsistency, next we have Momo, and her dark future is that she basically became this AU's Ray. The logic being that Endeavor thought that her quirk would create the perfect hero. And honestly, with her perk, I thought that they were going to make her some Jabba the Hutt super fat woman, and they were going to force her to just crank out weapons for this corrupt government, or that was going to be how we learned that her family ended up getting rich using her in that way or something. But this just feels more like the creator just wanted to have a concubine in the story. While it does make sense that Endeavor would do this, because obviously he's done it before, I just find it interesting that he was able to. You mean to tell me that the man who can literally set himself on fire doesn't have any issues with his quirk in this world of defective quirks? I imagine that he would be going the same route as his son Dabi, basically burning himself away slowly, but apparently his flames are well under control, even to the point where he's able to have a house full of breeding mares with no issue. Now, to give the creator some grace, if this is supposed to be a critique on how Marble Ruins made Jean Grey a prostitute willing to sell herself for 20 bucks just because, right? If this is kind of supposed to reflect the meaninglessness of that, I think that it gets the point across very well, especially considering that the baby ended up being a failure in Endeavor's eyes anyway. Next up, we have Soji, and he was basically used as a lab rat, with the goal being to turn a regular human into a hero, but they instead just created a monster that is forced to suffer, locked in this basement lab forever. This panel right here makes me think that maybe this is the goal for the corrupt government, meaning that they may want to actually create an army of genetically engineered heroes, which isn't that far-fetched for the My Hero Academia universe, if you think about it. Next, we have the Shining Hero, and that name is really fitting in this image here. He seemed to have been one of the more corrupt heroes in this AU, and ended up losing control of his power and getting split in two. I also like how they described him as being self-centered and basically trying to show off, which if you remember the show, kind of fits his character very well. After that, we get my favorite character, aka Suyu, and this one was kind of weird too. For some reason, she is a product of her family getting freaky with each other, and a mutation due to her quirk, which is why she looked like a frog monster. And to make matters worse, they also seem to hunt humans and drag them down into the sewer, acting as like the city version of the characters from The Hills Have Eyes. After that, we get Spinner, and the reason that he looks like a lizard is because he had a birth defect that gave him those features. Over the years, he has taken out many low-level heroes and even some of the UA students. When they finally did catch him, they sentenced him to the chair to make sure that he could never harm any heroes again. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy was like acting as a rebel, since he only seemed to be like attacking some of these heroes, and we know a lot of them are corrupt in this world, which again is another cool plot point that I think should have been explored more, but I'll talk about that more at the end of the video. Next we have Goto, aka Muscular, and this was the guy who had like the power to manipulate his muscles, but in this AU he doesn't actually have that ability anymore. But even still, he has become like some kind of weird carnival character where they damage him and then have somebody heal his wounds, and it seems like it's just for the sake of. I'm confused as to why the creator just didn't let him keep his powers, because it would make sense to do this to him then. But we also see that Mr. Compress has a role to play in this man's harming, so maybe this is just to show how evil Mr. Compress is. And my theory actually gets confirmed a little bit later when we see that Mr. Compress is basically like the ringleader of this black market business that traffics humans. And everything that he's doing to Muscular is just for the entertainment. He even has a quote here that says, "People don't want a happy ending, they don't want fairy tales. This is what they want. Guts, blood, suffering, up close. Why should I deny them that?" Next up we have Toga, and she's basically become a drug addict. And I know earlier I said that Momo was supposed to be the Jean Grey of this AU. It's actually Toga. She even ends up telling Deku that she'll do anything he wants just for a few cents. After that, we see a interesting character, that being Gigantomachia, I believe is how you say his name. And they actually found his corpse kind of like just washed up on the mainland, and they didn't actually know how he got to this state. Because if you remember correctly, this guy was huge and he was very powerful. The cane operator said it looks like his legs are completely eaten away. And the first thing that comes to my mind is Shigaraki, because I can't think of many other people who will make it look like his leg had been eaten away. After that, we have Kuroguri, and just like in the anime, this guy was a huge problem, but most of the heroes just ignored him because one day it just seems like he disappeared. Eventually though, he popped back up and he used his ability to like absorb this little baby right out of the mother, and then he just disappeared again.
Yo, why is he looking at me like that? What's up, little bud? Got a staring problem, pal?
And again, I feel like there was so much more that could have been done with this character, but he just kind of gets whittled down to a shock factor thing. Because this guy, like being an asset of the government, or even like this rebel force that is kind of been alluded to here, would have been like a awesome character either way. And finally, we have Jin, or aka Twice, and this guy ended up being placed inside a mental health hospital and had a surgery done to kind of help deal with his multiple personalities. What is interesting here though is that he said that he's not the only one, meaning that there are other versions of him out in the world. And when Deku finally gets to the hospital to speak with him, all he finds is mud, implying that this was not the actual main body. This also brings a little bit of clarity to why the clone said, "I'm not real, I'm just an illusion, a magic trick, a bad joke." It does bring me some joy that even though this world is so corrupt and like needlessly broken, hopefully Jin is out there living a decent life maybe. After that, we have Mustard, and this is another one of those things I felt kind of forced. As you can see here, he's actually just abusing this lady in the alley here, which I was surprised to see so many people justifying. And sure, while you can argue that this is a dark reality and things like this do happen, listen to how it actually goes down. Basically, Deku finds this guy in the alley doing this act, and Mustard ends up knocking Deku out. Afterwards, Mustard takes the camera that Deku has and starts taking pictures of the crime that he is committing, and then leaves the photos there for Deku to see when he wakes back up. This really just seems like the creator wanted an SA scene and they didn't care how they got it into the story. It doesn't even make sense. Now that we've gone over most of the characters here, let's cut over to Deku. And as you can see here, he's kind of coming to terms with the fact that his time is almost up. He's been doing research for 10 years to see if he can actually find a cure for himself, but also make this world a better place. And before his final moments, we get to see his thoughts, and he's saying that he's afraid, he's in pain, and he wants to ask for help, but since he's the real villain here, no one's actually coming to help him. And then we get back to this image of his hand disintegrating and him not knowing what was causing it. And then out of the darkness, Deku sees a hand pointing at him. After that, he starts to feel like heat and pain. And by the outline here, you can probably guess who this character is hiding in the shadows. After that, we see Deku's shoulder starts to fade away while he's trying to figure out who this figure is in the shadows. And then we see his face being infected, and one of his eyes starts glowing as Deku is begging for answers. And then we see this black screen with writing that translates to incineration ghost. In part 3 of the series, we see this partly burned stack of papers saying hero analysis for the future. And then we see that along with the papers, Deku has also been dispatched. Next, we see this image of a flaming boy saying ghost cremation. Not bad, but maybe a bit far-fetched. Then we see this man in full armor holding one of the photos that Deku had taken and saying that he has too much information on the government, which seems to be the reason that they ended up taking him out. We learned that this person here is called the peace symbol and seems to have the ability like All for One. We also learned that the flaming boy is called Ghost Fathom. And what I find even more interesting is that his ability is called ethanol fire. And ethanol is used in like alcoholic drinks, hand sanitizers, and even like different fuels. And it seems like this kid has the ability to set ethanol on fire, which can be very powerful in the right situations. The kid also asks if he burned the old man, who is still in the shadow, saying that the boy learned the basics of being a hero today, which is super twisted. And then we clearly see All Might looking as sickly as ever, but also showcasing that he is likely a part of this corrupt government. And just as a side note, I wonder if this kid is supposed to be like one of Endeavor's kids in this AU. With all the concubines that Endeavor's has, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a kid like this and then basically allowed the government to use him for, whatever corrupt end that they have. Now, while editing this video, I actually went back to the creator's channel just to see if he added anything about this little boy there, and I was surprised to see that there is actually like an extra episode that was outside of his playlist. In this episode, we learn more about his power, and we also learned that his mother was the Invisible Girl. So basically, the reason that people don't understand why they're just been burnt up out of nowhere is because this guy is basically like an invisible flame. It seems like he may have the power of Invisible Girl and also Endeavor, which, as I said earlier, would not surprise me. We all know that Endeavor is capable of it. The final panel of this series seems to be a flashback with Deku stating how he feels bad for Bakugo, remembering how they used to play together as kids, and then comparing that to the broken person that he is now. Next, we see someone, I'm not sure if this is somebody in the government or if it's still Deku talking, basically saying that Bakugo's sweat is basically nitroglycerin, and the government has put him into a suit that will keep him sweating. Their goal is basically like to turn him into a human bomb that becomes an ace in the hole for the government. Then we see this statement down here, which I think translates to true moonfish, but I'm really not sure about this one. Maybe somebody who speaks Spanish will have like a better understanding of what this means. Now, while I will say that the artwork here was fantastic, I think that this series kind of falls into the same pitfall that Marvel's Ruins did. It leans too much into nihilism and the idea that like the worst thing that can happen will happen, instead of focusing on telling a good story. I don't think people were like really shocked or awed by Marvel's Ruins, and this AU is kind of the same, but rather just confused on why the respective creators made the choices that they made. I would have loved to have like more backstory about this corrupt government, or even like why some of these heroes or anti-heroes were attacking the government or attacking other heroes, because that was like the most interesting part of the AU. But instead, we kind of just get stuck with like the body horror and the essay, and it all feels like very edgy and like, hey, did I shock you? But I think if the creator was ever going to pick this up and they wanted to flesh this world out a little bit more, it could be a really good story here. Probably one of the best horror AUs out there, just with the characters and the world building that is kind of in the background. As it stands right now, not really my cup of tea, but definitely has potential. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, check out this video on the screen here. Subscribe to Data Become a Member of the Orcs Force, and we'll see you next time with another one. Peace, peace.